and the parents are no longer able to even influence their children. And so these kids become hooked on each other, and the social media makes it possible for them to be with each other, even in the isolation of their own bedrooms.
Right.
So that peer relationships, in the absence of adult influence, and then the power of the technology, creates a monster. And that's what we're seeing now. And so literally, kids have shorter attention spans, they have more aggression, they have less tolerance for difficulty, higher levels of frustration, which is what drives aggression. It's a perfect storm.
So are the kids doomed? Because they have been doing studies that show reduced gray matter volume in the amygdala, the part of the brain that helps control emotions and behavior, as a result of exposure to screens. Now, particularly Generation Alpha is struggling with reading. They're seeing these kids much slower than generations before them. You're having, I don't know if a study's been done on it yet, but a lot of anecdotal evidence of these kids being completely addicted to their iPads, who will just have a complete meltdown if you try to take the iPad away from them. There was a recent study showing 13-year-olds experiencing aggression at 37%. Really scary given where some of the AI and VR technology are going. 13-year-olds, 20% report having hallucinations already.
Wow.
It seems, going back to the way we've evolved, our brains have not evolved to constantly be looking at screens like this. I mean, it seems obvious that was going to rewire the brain in ways that interfere with normal functioning. Should we be legislating this? It seems like a case where capitalism is at odds with public health, as it so often is, because it's more profitable to get these kids hooked on technology than to say, well, this is going to destroy their ability to function cognitively in a normal way.
Well, this is an issue that we discuss in some depth in the book, The Myth of Normal. And here's the shinny on the human brain. Human brain is not genetically programmed. That the brain actually develops through an interaction between genes and the environment. So which circuits develop and which don't has very much to do with environmental input. And the most important environmental input is the quality of emotional relationship with the nurturing adults. But when kids spend most of their day away from their parents, those brains don't develop as well as they should. And there's been specific studies on the impact of screens and on young kids. And you can see the brain damage on scans. This has been done and documented more than once by now. So these kids underdeveloped of their brains that of circuits that manage social interaction, intuition, caring, vulnerability, curiosity, and so on. So literally, we're raising generations of brain-damaged kids. That's right. And by the way, it's not a byproduct. The internet companies know how to target those circuits in the kid's brain that are most addiction. There's one company called Dopamine Lab. Literally, they program the cell phones and so on to excite the circuits in the brain that are most prone to addiction. So yes, and so that trying to separate a 4-year-old from their iPad once they become used to it, it's like trying to wean or take a drug addict off their substance of use. That's the first point. The second point is it goes back to what I said earlier, which is that all this is taking place in the context of reduced parental influence and increased peer influence. So there's a recent book, The Age of Anxiety by Jonathan Haidt, about a big impact of the social media and technology. He's correct as so far as he goes, but it doesn't go far enough, because underlying the power of the social media is the lost connection with the parents. And the parents are no longer able to even influence their children. And so these kids become hooked on each other, and the social media makes it possible for them to be with each other, even in the isolation of their own bedrooms.
Right.
So that peer relationships, in the absence of adult influence, and then the power of the technology, creates a monster. And that's what we're seeing now. And so literally, kids have shorter attention spans, they have more aggression, they have less tolerance for difficulty, higher levels of frustration, which is what drives aggression. It's a perfect storm.
I mean, I feel like also the technology itself keeps a lot of the status quo that we're talking about in place. In a way, it's an equalizer. What I mean by that is, okay, a really rich guy has a much nicer, bigger house than a working class guy or a poor guy, right? They probably have a much nicer car, if not 3 or 4 times, as many cars as the poor guy has. But we can all pretty much have the same phone. It's like these uber wealthy celebrities are walking around with the new iPhone. It's not that hard for an ordinary person to get their hands on a new iPhone. And if we're spending 5 hours a day like this, and the rich guy is spending if a poor guy spends 5 hours a day like this, and the rich guy we're engaging in the same way. It's kind of an equalizer at that point, no matter what else is going on in our lives. And I think that, in a way, has really neutered a lot of like political consciousness, because we've all been.
It's an interesting point.
We've all been kind of bought off.
That's why they think Elon is their buddy, because he's on social media.
Well, he's on the social media, right? I mean, the big Instagram influencers, they live on the same device you do. You're kind of their equal for as long as you are connected to that screen. And I know, doing this for a living, my screen time hours are through the roof because I'm constantly scrolling Twitter looking for stories to cover. But a lot of people have screen time in a lot of other ways, and I think that kind of neuters the political consciousness in a sense. What do you think about that?
What it does is it makes you completely externally focused.
Right.
So you're no longer actually in touch with your own emotions, your own body states, your own thoughts. And you're so influenced by what other people think, you just lose your individuality. And when it comes to political thinking, we think it's all about the intellect of what you think or what you believe. Actually, I can tell you an interesting story. Ronald Reagan, when he was president, was making an address on television. And Oliver Sacks, who was a neurologist.
Awakenings.
Awakenings, no longer alive, but he was a very well-known neurologist and an author. And in his book, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, he describes watching a group of aphasiac patients at a medical ward watching Ronald Reagan on television. Now, aphasiacs are people who've lost the capacity to process language because of a stroke in that part of the brain. And these aphasiacs are looking at Reagan, Sacks describes, and many of them are laughing, and some of them are just looking outraged. And Sacks says in his book, is it that they didn't understand Reagan, or is it that they understood him all too well? Here's the deal about aphasiacs. When you do studies on aphasiacs and normal people, when it comes to telling when somebody's lying, the aphasiacs are about 80% capable of telling when somebody's lying without understanding a word they're saying. The people who understand the words are only about 50% able to tell when somebody's lying. Now, why is that? Because the aphasiac is paying attention to his gut feelings. He's noticing the body language of the person that's speaking. He's noticing, is it a politician's smile with the narrow eyes, or is it a genuine smile? And they can tell because they're connected to their gut feelings. That's all they got to go by. Now, that means that as a guide to political reality, the intellect is only a part of it. Cut off from our gut feelings, it's a very poor guide. Now, if people were connected to their gut feelings, would they elect these people that lie all the time and whose lies can be documented? I'm talking about politicians of any party. I'm not, I'm not making partisan politics here. I'm talking in general. A lot of, I mean, when somebody lies to you repeatedly or makes promises to you repeatedly that they don't keep in your personal life, would you stay friends with them? But politically, we keep electing them over and over and over again because people are so connected from themselves and from their gut feelings. So that, and then the internet, of course, helps numb us to ourselves. So yes,
Right.
all that internet involvement and all the scrolling that we all do, it does have a political dimension to it. Ultimately, it's a support for the status quo.
So what, to close out, maybe on a positive note, we'll see how you answer this. What advice would you give to people to maintain mental and emotional health in such a toxic cultural moment?
Well, that's been studied as well, and it's interesting. In the Myth of Normal, I think on the very last page or the second last page, we quote Abraham Maslow, who's a very well-known psychologist. I think he was a psychologist. And he looked at people that were, in fact, do you mind if I look up the reference? Can you give me a second?
No, sure. Yeah,
Go ahead.
You can edit. You can edit it out.
No, okay. This is a more thorough answer than I was expecting. I was expecting him to say ultra MAGA. You gotta go ultra MAGA. That's the key to
ultra MAGA.
Yeah.
Ultra MAGA. Yeah.
Yeah, ultra MAGA.
Okay, so Maslow. I just have to scroll to the almost second last page of this book.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
So here's it. Okay, so let me, if I can, the thing about being an author, you get to quote yourself. Okay, so here I am quoting from the book I wrote with my son Daniel, The Myth of Normal. As it turns out, it is often individuals who define conventional normality who are the healthy ones. The psychologist Abraham Maslow made the investigation of self-actualization the attainment of authentic satisfaction, not based on external valuations, his life's work. So that satisfaction doesn't come from people like or approve of you. It comes because you are connected to yourself. It's totally different. And he said, and I'm quoting him now, a study of people healthy enough to be self-actualized revealed that they were not well adjusted in a naive sense of approval of and identification with the culture. He said they had a complex relationship with their much less healthy culture. And so they were neither conformists nor automatic rebels. They had the inner compass, in other words.
Right.
And he says, an inner feeling of detachment from the culture was not necessarily conscious, but displayed by almost all. They very frequently seem to be able to stand off from it as if they did not quite belong to it. And so the answer to your question is how to be in this culture without being of the culture. So you need to work towards developing that connection to yourself, to your heart, to your gut feelings, so that you're not obliterated by the pressures of conformity for the culture. And that takes work, and that takes constant questioning. And it takes the constant risk that some others will not understand you. And you have to be able to accept that. So it takes a degree of a desire to be yourself in the face of the tsunami of information and blandishments and seductions that this culture throws at you. That's what it takes.
Yeah, that's a great answer, because that's, again, you kind of blew my mind, because that's my reflex. The reason why I have such distaste for like culture war politics and culture war topics is because I think I have an inclination just to react that way. Oh, the culture is mean to men. Okay, well, just ignore the culture then. Okay, just ignore it. Like we don't have to spend hours and hours on end arguing about it. Oh, the culture sucks. Well, just don't be a part of it. It's worked for me reasonably well. Maybe I've gotten lucky, but that's always been my feeling. Like my always feeling is like, hey, look, sometimes you're swimming with the tide, sometimes you're swimming against the tide. It doesn't matter.
The only question is, I think that's very good, actually, in a certain sense. But who's saying that? Are you saying that with a sense of calm, groundedness, or are you saying it with resentment and disdain?
I don't say anything with a sense of calm.
He has a lot of stomach problems.
Yeah, I don't say anything with a sense of calm. No, it is. You're right. I mean, that's a very good point. Obviously, is that it is a source of tension, but that's always sort of been my conviction. Is that I'm just not gonna worry about it too much. Well, and again, maybe somewhere I am worried about it.
Well, as soon as you look, I did the speaking tour of Australia in February, and I thought, here's a really uptight country, because I spoke to 28,000 people in 7 cities, and everywhere you go, you thank somebody for a cup of coffee, they say no worries, and you thank them for taking your luggage at the airport, no worries. I thought, how tight must they be? I mean, who'd worry about a cup of So when you say, I don't worry about stuff, I'm telling you, you do, but you just don't want to acknowledge the worry,
Right.
And so it's all a question of where you're coming from. You can maintain that attitude of healthy detachment from a place of calm groundedness, or you can be do so from a point of resentment. And believe me, I know from resentment. I've experienced it in my life. So I think you're going through what I've experienced quite a lot. And that's worth investigating, because that tension that you experience, if that's what it is that you experience with that stance, that tension eats at you.
Come see us live. Glasgow, Manchester, Belfast, Dublin, London, Liverpool, Birmingham. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.